If there were a simple, natural, science-backed habit you could do before every meal, no supplements, no gimmicks, no powders, no strange detox teas, and it could help flatten blood sugar spikes, lower insulin demand, reduce oxidative stress, improve satiety, and even help support healthy weight loss, wouldn't you want to know what it is? Because for decades, researchers around the world have been studying a surprisingly powerful approach that often gets overlooked. And the best part? You can start using it at your very next meal. This is Dr. Michael Greger, and today we're diving into a fascinating body of research showing how a specific food group taken before you eat can have a significant impact on your body's insulin response. And no, it's not a supplement aisle miracle, it's not a trending diet hack on social media, and it's definitely not an expensive packaged product. It's one of the simplest, most accessible, most evidence-backed dietary strategies we have for modulating post-meal glucose levels, and the science is remarkably consistent. When we think about insulin spikes, most people jump straight to sugar, carbs, glycemic index, maybe even keto. But postprandial glucose, for example, what your blood sugar does right after you eat, is about much more than just carbohydrate intake. It's about the order in which you eat different foods, the physical characteristics of the meal, the speed of gastric emptying, the viscosity of the foods in the stomach, the activation of gut hormones, and how fiber interacts with digestive enzymes. And one category of foods keeps coming back again and again in clinical trials as a way to prime your body before you start eating the rest of your meal. So what is this category? We're talking about viscous, fiber-rich plant foods eaten before your main meal. Foods like beans, lentils, vegetables, apples, citrus, and other high-fiber, water-rich plants that create what researchers call a second meal effect, and even more interestingly, a pre-meal insulin-modulating effect. This concept first emerged decades ago in what became known as the second meal phenomenon. Eat something high in fiber, particularly soluble or viscous fiber, earlier in the day, and your blood sugar response to a completely different meal later in the day improves, meaning your breakfast can influence your lunch and even your dinner. But what if we apply that same mechanism in a more direct way by consuming a small portion of these foods immediately before a meal? That's exactly what researchers started testing. One of the strongest bodies of evidence comes from looking at what happens when you eat non-starchy vegetables or legumes before meals. In study after study, when participants ate a small portion of vegetables like salad greens, broccoli, carrots, or even vinegar-dressed veggies before a meal containing carbohydrates, researchers observed significantly lower post-meal glucose and insulin levels. Why? Because fiber, especially viscous fiber, forms a kind of gel in the stomach and small intestine. This gel slows down gastric emptying, meaning the rest of your meal enters the bloodstream more gradually. It also physically interferes with enzymes that break down starches into sugar, and it modulates the secretion of gut hormones like GLP-1 and GIP, which further help regulate insulin. Think of viscous fiber as nature's nutritional airbag, slowing, buffering, smoothing the impact of the meal that follows. Now, when you look at legumes, beans, chickpeas, lentils, they're not just fiber-rich, they're uniquely rich in soluble and viscous fiber. This is why lentils, in particular, have been shown to blunt blood sugar spikes even when eaten hours before another meal. In fact, a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that when participants ate lentils earlier in the day, their dinner glucose response improved, even if the dinner contained high glycemic carbs like white rice. But what happens when you eat those legumes immediately before a meal? Researchers tested this, too. A group of participants were given either a small pre-meal serving of cooked beans, just a few spoonfuls, or nothing at all before eating a standardized carb-heavy meal. The group that consumed beans beforehand saw significantly lower glucose and insulin spikes. And we're not talking about a massive bowl of beans, just a small amount was enough to prime the system. But legumes aren't the only option. Another body of research highlights non-starchy vegetables, especially leafy greens and vinegar-dressed salads. In one study, participants consumed a small plate of salad, lettuce, cucumber, carrots, mixed with a tablespoon of vinegar before a pasta meal. The result? Glucose spikes dropped by nearly 30% and insulin spikes dropped by up to 50%. Half the insulin load just by starting with a small salad. And this wasn't because of the lettuce, it was because of two things, the fiber and the acidity. Acidity from vinegar slows gastric emptying and improves insulin sensitivity in the muscles. Fiber slows carbohydrate absorption. Together, these effects create a metabolic buffer. But what if you don't want a salad every meal? Fortunately, the research has expanded to fruits, especially apples and citrus. In one study, simply eating an apple 15 minutes before a meal produced a measurable reduction in blood sugar spikes. Apples are rich in pectin, a viscous fiber that forms a gel-like matrix. Citrus fruits carry similar pectin-rich effects, so an apple before meals isn't just eating healthy, it's a biological strategy with measurable metabolic benefits. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds too simple, but that's exactly what excites nutrition researchers. Sometimes the most profound effects come from the simplest interventions. Let's look deeper into the mechanisms.
When fiber-rich foods enter the stomach first, they mix with gastric fluids, swell, and form that viscous layer. This delays the movement of food from the stomach to the small intestine, giving your system more time to handle the incoming glucose. Fiber also reduces the diffusion of digestive enzymes, meaning starches break down more slowly. And because glucose is absorbed at a slower pace, insulin is released more gradually. This reduces stress on the pancreas and helps smooth out metabolic peaks and valleys throughout the day. Another mechanism involves fermentation. Fiber that isn't digested in the upper intestine moves to the colon, where beneficial bacteria break it down into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and propionate. These compounds improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and even support appetite regulation. This is why the effects of eating fiber-rich foods aren't just immediate, they compound over time. And then there's the gut hormone effect. When viscous fiber enters the small intestine, it stimulates the release of incretin hormones, such as GLP-1, which enhance insulin sensitivity and help stabilize blood sugar. There are entire classes of diabetes medications designed to increase GLP-1, but your body can stimulate it naturally with the right foods. So what foods work best before meals? Let's highlight the strongest evidence-supported categories. 1. Legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas. These consistently show the most powerful effects. Lentils, in particular, are the rock stars of glucose control. Even half a cup can produce a dramatic flattening of blood sugar curves. But remember, even a smaller amount, just a few spoonfuls, can create pre-meal benefits. 2. Non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, broccoli, carrots, cucumbers, cabbage, okra, zucchini. The more fiber and volume, the greater the buffering effect. A small portion of vegetables before the main course is enough to see metabolic improvements. 3. Vinegar-dressed salads or diluted apple cider vinegar. The vinegar piece is interesting. Multiple randomized controlled trials show that about 1 tablespoon of vinegar, diluted in water or used on a salad before a meal, can improve insulin sensitivity. But pairing vinegar with fiber produces a synergistic effect. 4. Whole fruits rich in soluble fiber. Apples, oranges, pears, berries, all contain pectin, which forms that beneficial gel. Eating whole fruit before a meal, not juice, produces a measurable reduction in glucose spikes. 5. Viscous fiber foods like oats or barley. These are particularly rich in beta-glucans, which are known to blunt glucose responses. While they're commonly eaten as meals on their own, small pre-meal servings can have effects too. Now, the next question people often ask is how much do you need? Fortunately, the research suggests that you don't need a large amount. Even one small bowl of salad, one small apple, a few spoonfuls of beans, or a tablespoon of vinegar can activate these mechanisms. It's about priming the digestive system, not filling the stomach. So what would this look like in practical terms? Imagine you're about to eat lunch. Before diving into your main meal, you spend 1 minute eating a small bowl of steamed vegetables, or a handful of chickpeas, or a small lentil salad. That simple step changes the physiological response of your body for the next several hours. Instead of a sharp spike, your glucose rises gently. Instead of a big insulin surge, your pancreas releases a smoother, more moderate amount. Instead of feeling tired, sluggish, hungry, or craving sweets later, you stay more stable. This isn't a diet, it's not a restriction, it's a sequence. And in nutrition science, sequence matters. In fact, there's a growing field called meal sequencing research, and it shows that eating fiber-rich foods before starches and sugars consistently flattens glucose curves. In one experiment, researchers compared eating vegetables first versus eating bread first. Same total meal, same total calories, same foods. The only difference was order. And the vegetable-first group had significantly lower glucose and insulin levels. Think about how powerful that is. The same food, eaten in a different sequence, changes the metabolic outcome. So why doesn't everyone know about this? Part of the reason is that dietary advice often focuses on what to eliminate. Cut carbs, cut sugar, cut portions, cut calories. But the pre-meal fiber strategy isn't about taking away, it's about adding. And adding simple, whole, unprocessed plants before meals is not only sustainable, it's enjoyable. Because beans, lentils, vegetables, fruits, these foods aren't just health protective, they're delicious, affordable, and accessible worldwide. And let's talk about something else that often gets overlooked: the long-term benefits. When you regularly blunt your body's glucose and insulin spikes, you're not just affecting the next few hours, you're affecting your long-term metabolic trajectory. Chronically high insulin levels are linked with increased inflammation, increased fat storage, increased oxidative stress, and increased risk of metabolic disease. Flattening those spikes helps reduce the metabolic load on your system.
And while this strategy is often highlighted for blood sugar control, it also helps with appetite regulation. Several studies show that eating a fiber-rich starter, like a vegetable soup or a small salad, can reduce total calorie intake at that meal by increasing satiety. So not only does eating fiber before meals help with insulin control, it can also help with weight management. But the primary benefit is metabolic stability, giving your body a smoother, more controlled response to the rest of the meal. Now, someone might say, can't I just take a fiber supplement? Isn't that quicker? It's true that certain viscous fiber supplements like psyllium can produce similar buffering effects when taken before meals. But whole foods don't just provide fiber. They provide antioxidants, polyphenols, minerals, vitamins, and compounds that support the microbiome. Whole foods create more diverse fermentation patterns, more varied short-chain fatty acids, and more rounded metabolic effects than isolated powders. Plus, studies consistently show that whole foods outperform supplements when the goal is improving long-term metabolic health. Nature packages things the way it does for a reason. So what's the easiest way to use this strategy? You can adopt what I call the first bite rule. Whatever meal you're eating, breakfast, lunch, dinner, start with something fiber-rich. A small serving is enough. It can be a few bites of beans, a handful of vegetables, an apple, or a vinegar-dressed salad. And if your meal already includes fiber-rich foods, even better, but leading with them gives your body a head start.
Some people like preparing a small bowl of beans they keep in the fridge and eat a few spoonfuls before meals. Others like slicing apples or keeping pre-made veggie bowls ready. Some enjoy a small lentil soup starter. Others like a quick cucumber and leafy green salad with a splash of vinegar. It doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be consistent. If you think this is too simple to be powerful, that's exactly what makes nutrition science so interesting. Simple doesn't mean ineffective. Simple means accessible. And accessibility is what drives public health outcomes. And the science is overwhelmingly clear. Eating fiber-rich foods before meals helps control insulin spikes. The only question is whether people know about it and whether they'll use it. So if you're someone dealing with blood sugar swings, insulin resistance, fatigue after meals, cravings, or simply want to protect your long-term metabolic health, this is one of the most practical, evidence-based habits you can adopt. Plant-based diets already offer profound metabolic advantages, but simply changing the order in which you eat certain foods can produce immediate improvements, starting at your very next meal. And if you'd like to dive deeper into the research, I have dozens of videos breaking down the specific trials on legumes, vinegar, fiber, GLP-1, and meal sequencing. But for now, experiment with it yourself. Try this strategy for a few meals and see how you feel. See if your energy holds steadier. See if you feel fuller longer. See if your meals feel smoother. Your body is remarkably responsive to even the smallest dietary changes, and when you give it the tools it needs, particularly fiber-rich, whole plant foods, you're not just managing health, you're building it. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a like, hit the subscribe button, and click the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. And check out the next video waiting for you right here, where we dive even deeper into the science of using whole plant foods to transform your health. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.